Thank you for joining us today and happy Friday. My name is Corbin Delaney. I'm the marketing manager here at Life Data Labs. And with me today is Miss Susan Holt, who is our customer service manager. So if you've ever called into our toll-free number or emailed us at our C-Service at lifedatalabs.com, then more than likely you've talked to Miss Susie.
I can talk on the phone all day, email all day, but you turn this camera on and I get a little nervous. So forgive me if I look nervous.
Susie also tends to come with us when we do the International Hoof Care Summit. So if you've ever attended the Hoof Care Summit, you've probably met her there.
Yeah, once a year.
Once a year. That's the only time we let her out. Yeah. We're Life Data Labs. If you are not aware of our company, we're the makers of Farrier's Formula, which is the #1 recommended hoof supplement in America. We're not only a nutritious and a nutrition making company and for horses and other animals, but we're also a very research-minded company. So we're, of course, Farrier's Formula is pretty well known, and just to give you a little bit of who we are, as we begin in this presentation, we ask that you like and share the video, and also make sure to comment. Let us know where you're watching from. And as we go out through this video, if you find that you have any questions, please feel free to comment. We actually have Dr. Scott Gravely, our nutritionalist. He's watching this along with some of our other customer service team, and they will be responding to the best of their capabilities. When we're doing these live, sometimes those comments can come in pretty quickly.
Very fast.
Can be easy to miss one. So if we do miss one, it is our apologies. We'll try to get it after the video. And if we still haven't responded, you can always email us at that C-Service at lifedatalabs.com, or always give us a call our toll-free number, and we'll be happy to help you. We do have a few upcoming trade shows I want to make everybody aware of. We've got the NAP Equine Practitioners Conference coming up in September. That's actually going to be September 25th through the 28th in Saratoga Springs, New York.
And you're going to that one?
Yes, that'll be me. I'll be attending that one. The one right after that is going to be one of my personal favorites, which is Equine Affair in Springfield, Massachusetts. That's going to be November 7th through the 10th. And that will not only be me, but Darren Owen, who's our Farrier friend. If you guys have gone to any of our other trade shows that we've attended, you may have met Darren. But that's going to be me and him. Both of us are going to be there. And then our very last one in the year is actually going to be the AFA convention, which is the American Farriers Association. That's going to be in Chattanooga, Tennessee, from November 11th through the 15th. Now, Susie, one of the things that I did when we launched our event, was I asked everybody who signed on, what concerns do you have for your horse's hoofs? And just some of the comments that we got, we had someone say that they were keeping them from falling apart and staying barefoot. Another one was they struggled with white line disease, chipping off as fast as they grow. And I know you personally have talked to people probably multiple times this week regarding problems that they're having.
Many of these with all these kind of issues, especially the weather like it is. I'm hearing it's either too wet, too dry. Of course, white line disease is always an issue, but yeah, all these issues every day.
Absolutely.
Emails, phone calls.
And the comment that really on Facebook that really stood out to me is we had an individual say that they've been working on getting them healthy, but barefoot is a lot of work. They're trying to go barefoot. And not only is keeping your horses barefoot a lot of hard work, but just developing hoof quality, developing hoof growth, it's a lot of work.
Right.
There's a lot that we have to look at. There's a lot that we have to do as horse owners. And to promote that hoof growth, to promote that hoof quality, there are several factors that we have to look at. And that's where the hard work comes in. There's not just one simple trick to have good hoof quality.
Right.
We have to look at all these factors, and all these factors really have to be addressed for us to develop the best hoof possible.
Right. And there's so many factors that can cause issues with the hooves. You have genetics, mechanics, farrier work can cause issues with your hooves. The environment, of course, our favorite subject is nutrition. Along with the other ones, I think Zach has on the slide there.
Absolutely. Now, out of these factors, there are a few of these that we actually we can have some control over. There's things that we can do, that we can address, but unfortunately there are a couple things in that list that we really can't control.
Right.
The biggest one's going to be genetics. We fail to breed for hoof quality. It's just, I've never heard anybody say, you know what, I'm breeding this horse because those hoofs are just pristine.
Yeah.
That's just not something that's always top of mind. We're looking at speed, gait, how athletic the horse is, color, breed, and we're not paying attention to hoof quality.
Right.
And so if we're not breeding for hoof quality, then we're not going to develop that good hoof quality in the foal all the time.
Right.
And then we end up in even situations where, I know you've heard it. How many times, I've got the typical thoroughbred feet.
Right. Nothing I can do about it.
Nothing I can do about it. Just typical thoroughbred feet. Right. And so there are some breeds that just, through that process of breeding, that they just no longer, it's very difficult for those horses to develop good hoof quality.
Right.
And then another one that's pretty uncontrollable is going to be age.
Right. The horse is going to age. You can't do anything about that. Then their hoof growth decreases as they age. We have another slide here to put up, but it's known that the younger horses' hooves grow faster than the older horse does. And matter of fact, the 1-year-old hoof growth is twice as fast as horses over 12 years old.
Oh, wow.
So you're going to see a big difference in those. And there are some controllable factors we can look at that affect the hooves. Of course, we have the mechanics and farrier work. The balanced hoof is very important to blood circulation, which is also very important to the hoof growth.
And that's one of the reasons why we always advise maintaining a proper farrier schedule and developing just a really good relationship with your farrier. That farrier is going to be key to really maintaining that hoof balance. And some of those keys to some of those benefits to maintaining that schedule are, of course, going to be maintaining that hoof quality, maintaining that hoof balance. One of the issues that we have with unbalanced hoofs is going to put a lot of strain on the hoof wall if those hoofs are unbalanced. It's going to promote wall separations. It's going to compromise hoof health. And you think about it a lot, I always think about it almost like a car.
Right.
When we have our tires are out of alignment, the left side is going to wear out more than the right side, or vice versa. And this is the same thing with the horse. It's going to wear out those hoofs quicker when we don't have that right balance. And not only that, but it's going to put extra tension on the tendons. It's going to end up affecting the joint support as well. And one of the big benefits to me, and I know on the slide we have the no extremes. And what I mean by that is, but no extremes, is that we're going to decrease the chance of hoof issues developing or worsening as time goes on.
Right.
With that farrier coming out regularly, we can catch those issues before there's a problem, right? Where if we go a length of time without it, a very small problem that could have been easy to fix ends up developing into something worse.
Exactly.
Which at the end of the day is going to, of course, affect hoof quality. It's going to affect that hoof growth. And end up, where a small case of thrush is now blown out, it's in sensitive tissues, and we have a real problem.
Right.
And then lastly, just overall, we're talking about comfort. That horse's comfort is so important, and those balanced hoofs and that hoof quality. Could you imagine walking around with a hurt toe? It's never fun. Right. So we're talking about that horse's hoofs. We want that horse to be comfortable.
Right.
And of course, we're getting into the fall season. We're getting in, of course, winter's coming up too. And so I know a lot of people I've talked to, they actually don't schedule the farrier through the winter. They kind of things start cooling off, and they just don't tend to bring out the farrier as much. And even as we get into these fall and winter months, it's still important to maintain that schedule and have that farrier out every 6 weeks or however long that you choose and your farrier decides to come out.
Right. And same way with the with our seasons, hoof growth also has seasons. Wintertime, the hooves don't seem to grow as fast as they do in the spring. Spring, you'll have regular hoof growth. Another thing that you'll notice is as the days get longer, the hoofs grow better. So you'll see increased hoof growth with the in the spring and the lighter days.
Absolutely. And of course, with the seasons, you also have the change in moisture. And that's a big one. I know when I was at Equine Affair this year, every time I turned around, I had someone coming up to me and just saying, my problem right now is there's just too much water, too much rain. And that excess moisture is going to be pretty detrimental or pretty damaging to those hoofs. One of the big ones is going to soften the hoof capsule, which is going to increase wear and tear. You're going to see some bruising. It's very common for, if your horse is shod, for the horse to lose a shoe. And sometimes when that shoe is lost or ripped out, you can actually bring some hoof with it, which is something we really want to avoid. Of course, that problem there is going to make that hoof more prone to bacterial and fungal invasions, which is going to lead to those hoof abscesses, thrush, white line disease, and all those external problems. Because as that hoof softens, of course, you're opening that hoof up to more infections, that's basically entryways that you're developing in that hoof for that bacterial and fungal invasions. Another one that doesn't get talked about much is with the mud. We end up having, of course, the horse needs to use the restroom. So that mud mixes with the feces, and now your horse is not only standing in a wet environment, which is softening the hoof capsule, but now it's being exposed to the ammonia from the urine and of course the feces. And you might say, well, I'll just put my horse into the barn. But now it's standing in the stall where it's now being exposed to ammonia even more. And so that's another issue that we're having that we need to look at, especially if we're facing these excess moisture environments, is how do we stop this, and how do we protect our hoofs? Because overall it's going to decrease hoof quality, which is going to affect growth.
Exactly.
And so then on the reverse side of things, of course, we have the dry conditions, which is also going to be an issue for us.
Right. And so similarly, it's going to cause issues. You're going to have slow hoof growth. The dry conditions also make the hooves more brittle, going to cause cracks, chips, crumbling. This is just an entryway for bacteria, which could cause white line separation from the bacterial and fungal organisms.
Absolutely. Oh, and here in Alabama right now, it's been pretty dry lately. I mean, we really haven't. It's been pretty hot, pretty dry, which is a perfect condition, especially where we are, where we get into this wet, dry, which you may be aware of from some of our past live events that we've done. I know this is something we've talked about before, but it's important to pay attention to that, because even in those, if it's hot and dry, you may not have to worry about that moisture. But what ends up happening is, say for example, we have a summer thunderstorm come through. And so it's been hot and hot and hot, and then all of a sudden our pastures are just doused with rain, and we're basically this contracting and back and forth from that hoof is going to increase that chipping, cracking, and peeling as well. Right. Another one is, especially during the summer, that we talked about this a little bit in our last live event about, anhydrosis. Those horses are going to be sweating from practicing and competing. And so we're going to tend to do that frequent bathing. We're going to bathe the horse to cool it off, to just make sure the coat's nice before the performance. And again, if it's hot and it's dry, and then we're doing the frequent bathing, and those horses' hooves are sitting in the water, we're going to have that back and forth. And then the last one that I know I personally did not think about this at all until I started hearing people having problems with this, especially if it's dry right now and those front hoofs are cracking and chipping and you can't figure it out why. Could be the water trough. A lot of, it's something we don't think about, but that horse is standing in front of the water trough, it's drinking the water, it's developing mud in front of that water trough, and those front hoofs are sitting in that mud, and then you're having that wet, dry. Right. Maybe it's not the water trough, maybe it's a pond or something that you have in your pasture. But especially in those dry environments, that horse is going to be, it's going to be more common to go to that water trough and try to cool off. And so that's another one that's a pretty big issue. So regardless if you're having the dry, the wet, or the wet, dry, to really promote that hoof growth and that hoof quality, we have to figure out how to manage this environment that your horse is being exposed to.
Right. One thing that's very important, Corbin, is to make sure you look at the hooves daily. Pick the hoof, clean it with a hoof brush, hoof pick, just as well as you can clean it without having to use the water on it every day. And just wipe away and check it out good, make sure there's not anything going on. If you do have a new crack, a new broken place, go ahead and address it, before it gets too bad. You want to try to keep the horse in dry areas possible. I know some of these areas it's impossible, but if you can, if you know it's going to be raining a lot or getting a lot of mud there for a few weeks, you may want to try to move them to the barn or a different lot for a while till the grass can dry up some. Then of course we have topicals you can use. Of course we're going to promote our products a little bit, but you want to look for something that's non-caustic. You want a product that will work with the phospholipids in the hoof to manage the moisture, and then you also want something that kills bacteria and protects from bacterial and fungal invasions.
Absolutely.
There's certain products that can help to keep the issues from happening before they get too bad.
And we really want to be careful with those non-caustic products as well, especially if we're in these different environments and just in general. Some of these, different thrush remedies and so on that are very caustic can actually negatively impact hoof quality. And actually put us into cycles of thrush. It can actually strip away some of the natural oils on the hoof and dry out the hoof even more.
And some of them, I won't not calling names or anything, but some of them will cover up the hoof so where it can't breathe.
Yes.
And that just keeps the moisture in there, keeps the bacteria in there where the
Some
hoof
of those
cannot breathe.
oils and tars can block the oxygen.
Exactly.
And we want to. That's one important thing about cleaning those hoofs is we want oxygen to the hoof.
Right.
And so that's very important. And remind everyone here what Dr. Gravely's one rule was.
Oh yeah, never put anything on your horse's hooves you're not willing to put on your own hands or feet.
yes, that's it. If it says don't put it on yourself, don't put it on your
Good
horse.
sign not to use it.
Absolutely. And then another important step is, again, especially I know we're getting out of the summer now, people aren't practicing, not exercising the horse as much, but it's also important to continue that hoof maintenance after you're exercising,
Right.
Especially just in case a pebble or something got caught. But exercise does help self-clean the hoof. And that's something else that we can look at if we are seeing some slow growth is how much we are exercising these horses. Exercise is going to help increase the metabolic rate. It's going to help increase the blood flow within the hoof. And as Susie mentioned earlier, that blood flow in the hoof capsule is extremely important for hoof growth.
Right.
And so a lot of times you will see that these athletic horses that are getting the exercise will sometimes have better hoof growth than some of these other horses that are sitting in pastures and not getting the exercise.
Right.
The other, of course, big benefit of exercise is going to help manage that horse's weight. And the health, body condition, weight of the horse all play a role when we're talking about hoof quality and hoof growth.
Right. And some of those things that will affect the hooves when you're looking at the health and the overall body condition of the horse. Of course, you have obesity. Now, a big thing is insulin resistance. I can't tell you how many calls
All
we take.
the time.
And of course, when you go somewhere, a horse is insulin resistant. I never heard of it, 10, 15 years ago? It wasn't a thing we knew about, but now, of course, we keep the horses boarded up and we control what they eat. So therefore, they're going to get the sugars and the molasses and different things. So it's causing some issues. Of course, you have hoof-related injuries, joint problems. And like you talked about earlier, if they're shifting their weight on the hooves, that can cause issues. Cushing's disease is another one as big as the insulin-resistant issues. Then, of course, you have thyroid problems and equine metabolic syndrome. Some of these are just, some of them we can try to control, some of them we can't, but these are things to really keep in mind.
And if you've got a horse that's insulin resistant or has PPID, then we're probably preaching to the choir here. You probably know all the hoof issues that you're experiencing. Between hoof abscesses and laminitis. It's very common.
Right.
In today's society, when we look at all of those health conditions, the number one that we're really concerned about that often leads to some of these other issues is going to be obesity. Right now, the latest studies has been around about 50% of the horse population is overweight. I believe we have a slide pulled up right now showing those statistics. Back in the 90s, it was nowhere close to that, and we're seeing that increase, and it's become a very common problem. And that obesity, of course, is not only going to lead to some of these other issues, but it's also going to be a big contributing factor to hoof quality and to, of course, hoof growth.
Right. And some of the things we want to look at when you're talking about obesity, there's lack of owner education, of course. Overfeeding. I know we think if the horse doesn't have a lot to eat there, we're being bad parents
We're
or bad
abusing the
owners.
horse.
Yes. And so the more they have to eat, the happier they're going to be. But you have to be careful when you're overfeeding and the horse will just keep eating. You keep giving it to them, they're going to keep eating it. Of course, a lot of times people will feed the horse things that were made for cattle, designed for cattle. And then we've also made the pastures more lush and more fertile, so their horses are going out there and getting prime, food out there with just their grazing. And then, of course, lack of exercise. If the horse is just standing around, not doing anything, they're going to continue to get bigger.
Yes, and then as we mentioned earlier, the lack of exercise is going to affect that hoof growth because it's going to affect, the blood flow within the hoof, which is just one way that obesity is going to affect the hoof. These horses that are obese, we're going to have problems with inflammation. That obesity is going to end up leading towards affecting the lamina, which is going to promote cases of laminitis. It's going to hurt the circulation within the hoof, which is also going to promote the laminitis, plus reduce the hoof growth because we're not getting that proper blood flow. Strain and expansion on the hoof wall. I've heard it referred to pancaking a lot of times. And just, you think about the size, and how big the average horse's hoof is. And that's just, when we talk about all that weight being put on basically the 4 hoofs, those hoofs just tend to expand and pancake out if we're having too much weight put on there. And especially if we do that along with a wet environment and it softens the hoofs, we're going to end up having some problems. And so that strain and expansion is not only going to, like I mentioned, the pancaking, but the cracks, the crumbling hoof, and then joint issues. Because not only is that extra strain on the hoofs, but it's extra strain on the joints. And then again, less exercise. And so when we're talking about obesity, the ideal body condition that we're looking for, if you're looking at the Henneke body score scale, we're looking at in between a 5 and a 6. That can really kind of depend on, of course, what you're doing with your horse and how, if you're performing with it, or if it's just, your friend who sits out in the pasture, but we're looking between a 5 and 6, and we have an example pulled up right now of a 5, and you can see, this horse isn't so skinny that you can see its ribs. It's toned. The coat looks nice. Of course the coat's going to reflect how that internal health is doing. That's a big sign is that coat health. You can see it's a beautiful horse. It's ready to go. It has its energy. It's where we want it to be. Is that 5 to 6 scale. And there are, like I mentioned, the coat is a sign, that we're not doing something right internally. And I know there's a lot of other signs that we can look at to see if we have an imbalanced diet.
Right. Some of those signs we can look at, for example, of course, dull coat. The way you look on the outside is a reflection of how you feel on the inside.
Yes.
So you can tell if the horse is not doing well by just the coat sometimes. Of course, you have the muscle tone, lack of energy. Hooves. The hooves can tell you a lot about the horse and what's going on. Of course, splitting and cracking, difficulty holding the shoe. You shouldn't have to call the farrier back, 2 or 3 times before that 6-week period is out, when they're coming every 6 to 8 weeks to put on new shoes. You don't want them throwing a nail or losing the shoe. Of course, if they're prone to thrush, white line disease, and abscesses. We have many customers call saying, I just have a horse that's prone to abscess. Can't do anything about it. Just can't do a thing. But there's some things we can try to help that issue.
Yeah. And a lot of times, especially with that thrush and white line disease and hoof abscesses, we look at the environment, and the environment definitely plays a role.
Right.
But that nutrition is going to play a role too, because that nutrition is developing a hoof that's more, that can help. I don't want to say avoid, but it builds a hoof that's stronger and healthier. Right. That's less at risk of developing these issues. And so, when we look at nutrition, it's essential to that proper diet. And one of the big things regarding nutrition is that more than likely there's not going to be a single nutrient that your horse needs to improve hoof quality. What we're looking for when it comes to complete nutrition, it's a wide variety of different nutrients, amino acids, and things like that that horse needs to have that complete diet, to give that horse the nutrients it needs to build and improve hoof quality. And so that's definitely something that we need to look at, because when we dive into nutrition, we're going to find that if that horse is not receiving the correct amount, if it's in a nutritional deficiency and missing minerals, vitamins, and things, that's going to negatively impact the horse, and not just the hoofs, but the hair coat and the body condition, as we've discussed. And I'm going to show you guys a few examples of some of these nutritional deficiencies that are going to affect hoof health. The first one I have is calcium. And if you look at this image here, you can actually see how that hoof is crumbling. And calcium is the glue that's going to hold that hoof together. It's essential for the attachment with the horn cell, and just really important for the cohesion and integrity of the hoof horn. And so in that image, you can see around there on that hoof horn is just crumbling, and because we don't have that glue holding it together. And so calcium is just one example. Another one, which I know we've looked at this again in previous events that we've done, but vitamin A. Vitamin A is another one, and it's rare. This one's very hard to reproduce. It's not something common. I can remember, Mr. Mike Barker, when he was with us, telling us that, he had actually never even seen a vitamin A deficiency in person. But it's difficult to produce, but you can actually see that outer wall flaking away. You almost get these hair-like projections coming from the hoof. And so even though, vitamin A is rare, it's very capable of happening to your horse. And in both instances, you can see that those deficiencies, the way they've worked on the integrity of the hoof, all that cracking, all that chipping, all that cracking just opens up that hoof to all those bacteria and fungal invasions like we discussed.
Right.
It affects that integrity of the hoof, which is not what we want to do. As that one person mentioned on Facebook, it's chipping away as fast as it's coming down.
Right.
And that's something that we want to avoid. And on the reverse side, and that's not me saying that more is better, because more is not always better.
Right.
We don't want to, we don't want to avoid a deficiency by just packing that horse with more and more and more nutrients, because oversupplementation and nutrient toxicity is something that we also need to pay attention to.
Right.
As I mentioned earlier, building that hoof quality is hard work.
It is. And some things you have to watch out for is you can get the nutrients out of balance, and by trying to fix one, you start messing up the other one. So one main one I hear a lot about is bran, for example. Excess bran blocks the calcium you just talked about.
Yes.
Ties up the calcium in the horse's system so it can't get down to the hooves and can't get to where it needs to go. And the bran is used a lot, and that's one of the main things we always ask customers when they start explaining what kind of problems they have. Do you feed the horse bran? And there's multiple kinds of bran. You have rice bran, wheat bran. You always look at the fine ingredients, and you may not be feeding just bran by itself, but one of the ingredients in the full grain you're feeding may have bran in it. Another example of one of the ingredients that's easy to oversupplement is selenium. A lot of people will say, well, because my horse, we live in an area we don't, Life Beta doesn't, but some people live in areas where the selenium is deficient in their environment. So they automatically assume I have to feed selenium to my horse. Well, the horse gets some selenium from their hay, different sources, and also some horses may not need the extra selenium just because they're deficient in the area that they live in. Only way to be sure is have the blood tested, have the horse tested, see if they are selenium deficient. You can also look for things like lameness, hoof defects. There's crusty coronary band. You can notice that. And of course, the hoof wall invasion by bacteria and fungi. So there's different ways you can kind of tell by looking, the eye, but also you want to check those ingredients.
Yes.
I talked to a customer a few weeks ago. I hope she's watching. She'll know who she is if she is. And she told me what all she was feeding. She was feeding 5 different supplements, and each one had selenium in it. She was feeding 5 different sources of additional selenium. I said, do you live in an area that's selenium deficient? No, we're fine where I live. We have plenty of selenium. So we figured out, she talked to Dr. Scott, of course, and they helped figure out some things she needed to change. And she was feeding a little bit too much selenium to the horse.
A little bit too much.
Yeah. And then another source of, another ingredient we want to look at is sulfur. That is also an easy one to oversupplement. Of course, when you're feeding multiple supplements, like I just mentioned, a lot of times you're feeding a hoof supplement and a joint supplement. You want to look at the ingredients and compare and see how many you are duplicating. For example, methionine in our product is our source of sulfur. Methionine, of course, is, if you're feeding 2 or 3 sources of methionine, you may give the horse too much. Another ingredient to look for is MSM. MSM in the joint supplement, a lot of the joint supplements have that, and it is another source of sulfur.
Yes.
So you have to really look at these ingredients closely. Before you know it, you're feeding 4 or 5 sources of one thing. And that can also compromise the copper if you feed the horse too much sulfur.
And then kind of the sad thing is like you mentioned, you know, we're feeding this to try to fix the issue. And in that example in particular, you know, you're feeding that hoof supplement to improve the hoof health.
Right.
But in actuality, we're going to end up hurting hoof health.
Throwing everything else out of balance.
Yes. Right. And so we really want to pay attention to those ingredients. And another big one that I always personally hear about, of course, is biotin. I mean, we can't talk about nutrition in the hoof without talking about biotin. That's when I'm talking to individuals at these horse shows. You know, it's how much biotin is in Farrier's formula, or I'm feeding biotin just by itself, or I'm feeding this because it has this much biotin. And so there's always this big conversation regarding biotin and hoof health, and rightfully so. Biotin is extremely important for the hoof. But what a lot of horse owners don't know is that biotin is extremely difficult to be deficient in for that horse.
Right.
It's not, you know, super rare. There's definitely horses out there that can be deficient in biotin. But if that horse is deficient in biotin, it's also going to be deficient in other important nutrients as well. It's going to be very rare for that horse to be just biotin deficient. And so just feeding biotin is only going to help with, again, the biotin. And there's going to be other things that hoof needs as well. And so when we look at biotin, we can see it is a water-soluble B vitamin. And so when that is being fed in excess, it's actually going to be flushed out of the horse's system at the end of the day.
Right.
As I mentioned, it's rare in the horses. And what you're going to end up seeing are basically thick layers of hardened tissues that peel off. But biotin is naturally produced in the hindgut, which is why it's very uncommon for a horse to be deficient in it. I know Farrier's formula contains about 20 milligrams of biotin, and regardless if the horse is deficient in it, that's really all the horse needs.
It can absorb.
Yes. Well, and then when we're looking at that average 1,000-pound horse, that, you know, that's the recommended amount is about 20 milligrams
per day.
And any more than that, it's not going to, like I said, it's not going to hurt the horse. And some horses may even find it a little bit beneficial, but the majority of those horses, it's not really going to help any more than just feeding the 20 would, which is why we recommend that you go ahead and feed that complete hoof supplement that's balanced. That way, you know, we're not accidentally over supplementing on something and trying to piece together what we think the horse is missing, because we know that this is complete. This has got everything the horse needs. It's got to have the biotin in it. It's going to have the other amino acids and things that are important for that hoof health.
Right. And of course, we offer 3 different supplements for that. We have Farrier's Formula Double Strength. Farrier's Formula Double Strength is going to help grow stronger, healthier hooves. It is alfalfa base. You only feed a half a cup per day for a 1,000-pound horse. The Farrier's Formula, whenever you start feeding the Farrier's Formula Double Strength, you should see new hoof growth around the coronary band within 8 to 10 weeks of feeding it. You will also see a shinier, healthier coat on the horse. It's not going to help just the hooves, it's going to help other dermal tissues. And then you will also notice the hoof growth coming down around that coronary band. When you see that new growth, it's usually a thicker, denser hoof, so you know that is working. And as with any horse, it can take up to a year to completely regrow a hoof. Now, we do have many customers tell us that they notice the hooves growing faster with our product, or the Farrier came out last week and he can already tell the new hoof is growing down. So those are good signs that the product is working. We do have, for the feeding instructions, like I said, only a half a cup per day of the Farrier's Formula Double Strength.
And as you mentioned, we have basically 3 different versions of the Farrier's formula. Of course, our original one is just Farrier's formula. We call it Farrier's Formula Original around here.
It was the first.
Yes, we have the Farrier's Formula Double Strength, which is going to be the one that's recommended the most. And then we also have the Farrier's Formula DS Plus Joint. The best thing about all 3 of these products is all 3 of them, if you're feeding from the back of the instructions, they're going to feed the exact same amount. They're going to give the same amount of nutrients.
Benefits. Yeah.
They're going to have the same benefits. Thank you.
Yeah.
With the Farrier's formula, the original, you're actually going to feed a full cup for that 1,000-pound horse, and it's going to last about approximately 30 days compared to the double strength, which is going to last again approximately 60 days. So when you're looking at a per day feeding, that Farrier's Formula Double Strength is going to last you a little bit longer, and be a little bit more cost effective.
Right.
But with that half a cup to that full cup, they're going to have the same amount of nutrients.
Right.
And so you're not going to necessarily get more from feeding the double strength from a nutrient standpoint. You're just going to have to be able to feed less.
Right. There's a lot of confusion with those two products because people think, oh, well, my horse isn't that bad. I don't need the double strength. I'm just going to start on the original, or vice versa. I better start with the double strength, and once I get my horse better, I'll go to the original. Doesn't work that way. You need either or. You get the same benefits. And one thing I want to mention about the original, we have a lot of mini ponies and mini horses, and many customers, of course, have issues with these horse minis being overweight. And I've had so many tell me when I explain the difference. So if you're looking at a 500 pound, 250 pound, let's look at 250 pound, they will only get a quarter cup of Farrier's Formula. So if you go to feed them the Farrier's Formula Double Strength, I think it's like an eighth of a cup. So they're like, I might as well count out 10 pellets, and that's all the horse is going to have, the mini's going to have. So a lot of these horses with customers with smaller horses like to feed the original Farrier's Formula just because they're giving the horse more to chew.
Yes, I've heard others say that as well. Then we also have the Farrier's Formula DS Plus joint, which is going to have everything in it that the Farrier's Formula Double Strength has, but it's also going to have the additional nutrients that you need for that joint health. So it's essentially two products in one, and that goes back to that over supplementation of sulfur. That's going to allow you to feed that hoof supplement and that joint supplement without that risk of over supplementation. So it's going to take that risk out of it, and then of course you have basically two products in one.
The ease of feeding one. And a lot of the big thing to look at too is the cost per day. Normally the cost per day of the Farrier's Formula Double Strength Plus joint as compared to two supplements is cheaper or more economical than the feeding the two supplements.
Yes. And I know we've talked about pricing. We'll talk a little bit more about pricing here in a little bit because I know some of you are probably wondering how much it costs. And then the other benefit of the DS Plus joint is that no, it does not contain glucosamine. And so that's another one. Recent studies have shown that some of these insulin-resistant horses and glucosamine don't necessarily mesh well. And a lot of our customers, of course, use that Farrier's Formula DS Plus joint with their insulin-resistant horse. And so glucosamine is not in it to be beneficial to those horses as well. And a couple of the other products that we actually recommend feeding with or using alongside the Farrier's Formula are going to be our Farrier's Finish and Hoof Clay. And the reason being is if we do everything nutritionally for that horse, and we've got the perfect Farrier out trimming, and we're tackling every single one of those factors that we looked at, but our horse is still sitting in an inch of water, we're going to have problems. And so we have to, as Susie mentioned, using a topical is going to help with that. And so Farrier's Finish, I'll start with that one. It's going to help protect the investment that you're making into the hoof. It's going to help protect that investment you're making in your Farrier and of course in the Farrier's Formula. It is a liquid product. It's non-caustic, so again, it's not going to burn you. It's not going to burn the horse. It's strong enough that it's going to help fight thrush, white line disease. But it's also tame enough to where you can continue to use it as a preventative. The key ingredients that you're looking with that product is going to be tamed iodine, tea tree oil, and yucca extract. It also has a phospholipid compound within it that's going to work with those phospholipids in the hoof to help expel moisture in really wet environments and maintain moisture in the dry environments. Or again, if you're going wet, dry, it's going to help just manage that moisture and protect that hoof. The other big benefit of it is the yucca extract in it is going to tie up the ammonia that's usually secreted from the urine. And so if your horse is being exposed to feces and to urine because it's wet outside and you want to keep it in the stalls, then that Farrier's Finish is going to help. If you currently have a problem, I would say using it, the severity of the problem, kind of determines it too. But using it, 3-4 times a week if you have a problem. And then as things tend to get better, you can come off of it and use it maybe twice a week just as a preventative and help protect the hoofs. Especially if we're getting into the fall. Fall's going to bring moisture a lot of areas. So right now using that, of course, is going to be beneficial. The other one is going to be the Hoof Clay, Life Data Hoof Clay. Both these products can be used together. You actually want to put the Hoof Clay on first, and then the Farrier's Finish on second. And the reason being, if you put the Farrier's Finish on first, the Hoof Clay won't stick as well. And so we want to put that Life Data Hoof Clay on first. It essentially has the exact same ingredients to it, but the one big benefit of this, and this is why it's one of my favorite products that we carry, is because it's going to help you really target the problem areas that you're having. And so if you're having a bad case of thrush, you can get some of the clay, put it on either side of the frog, just get a really good smearing there. It's going to hold the ingredients into place without blocking oxygen, and keep those ingredients where they need to be to help fight that thrush. It's really great for those hoof cracks and hoof defects to really pack in there. We have a lot of individuals who will have their Farrier put it along the white line before putting a shoe on. And the big benefit of that is it's going to protect that area in between resets. Plus, as that Farrier nails in the new nails, hammers in the new nails, I should say, it's going to draw in that hoof clay into those new nail holes. Because new nail holes, old nail holes, again, entryways for bacteria, which is what we want to protect so that our hoof can grow. That's how we're going to promote that hoof growth.
I've had farriers tell me that when they came back to reshoe the horse, the next time there was still some hoof clay in between the hoof and the shoe.
They could smell it.
They could still see some of it. Some,
I know that's what Darren always tells me. He says when he removes the shoe, sometimes he can still smell the hoof clay after, even after the 6 weeks.
Wow.
And so the hoof clay, again, is a fantastic product to use along with that Farrier's Finish, because it's going to help protect that investment. It can also be used on barefoot horses. Because that barefoot horse is in a little bit more contact to the ground than the shod horse, you may have to apply it a little bit more often, but it's still going to do a good job staying in place. I know I've had a lot of people worry about the amount they put on. You really just need a good smearing. I've heard some people, will pack use half a jar
on one spot.
On one little spot. You really don't have to do that. As long as you get a good smearing so those ingredients can get to where they need to be so they can penetrate that hoof, then that's what we're looking for.
Right. Well, you want to look at prices?
Yes.
All right. So for the 3 Farrier's formula, the Farrier's formula double strength, I'll look at first. It is $83.99 for an 11-pound bag. And like you mentioned, it will last approximately 60 days. The Farrier's formula original is $55.99. It's going to last approximately 1 month when you're feeding that 1 cup a day. And then the Farrier's formula double strength plus joint, again, approximately 60 days, is $139.99. And then, of course, we do have to add shipping to these if you buy these direct from us. The hoof clay, we have 2 sizes here in the U.S. We have the 10-ounce jar and the 35-ounce jar. The 10-ounce jar is $23.99. The larger jar is $35. And then the Farrier's Finish is $41.99 for the 16-ounce jar, 16-ounce bottle. Now, one thing I wanted to mention is the double strength plus joint is only available in the U.S. right now, and Canada. It is not available in the United Kingdom and some of the other countries that we sell to. Sorry about that, but it's not available right now in those areas.
Yes. And then the Farrier's formula double strength in the EU is going to be referred to as the Farrier's formula double concentrate.
Yeah, good point.
And so if you do a quick Google search, if you're in the EU right now watching, you can do a Google search for that double concentrate, and that's what it's called here there.
Where
Susie,
to buy?
That's where I was about to get it. We just talked about the EU. Now we got to talk about where to buy it.
So here in the States, you can buy from us direct. We do have dealers. Our dealers are full-time farriers, tack and feed stores, and veterinarians. Then a lot of these dealers do sell online now. So as you do the Google search, you'll find a lot of dealers that'll sell it to you, ship it right to your house. But if you can't find, and then we do have a lot of stores that's been doing business with us for many, many years. If you do want to find a local dealer, you can go to our dealer locator on our website, lifedatalabs.com, or you can call us and we'll help you find a local supply, we hope. And a lot of farriers, I've just had one this week tell me, he said, the Farrier's formula makes my job easier. He said, I want to get as many as my customers. He's a new dealer for us. He said, I want to get as many as my customers on the Farrier's formula as I can, because it sure makes my job a lot easier. And I've had farriers tell me that it makes their work look a lot better too.
I've met a few farriers where that's one of their, if you're their client, you have to be on Farrier's formula. And so that's why, again, the number one recommended hoof supplement on the market. And just another fun fact about Farrier's formula is we're, I think, the only one of the few hoof supplements on the market that actually has a white paper to it. So it was independently researched and studied at Edinburgh University, and those results were published in the Veterinary Journal. You can actually find that on our website, or probably, again, just do a Google search to learn about it. And so just a little fun fact about the Farrier's formula. I know that we flew through this a little bit. When we could spend all day long on each topic that we went through today. And so that's really just a quick overview to help you as you begin that journey of developing better hoof health. It is, as I mentioned earlier, it's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of patience, but it takes a lot of work from you as the horse owner. I know a lot of people just immediately put that on the farrier. That farrier picks up the hoof, and that's the last time that hoof is picked up. But it's a consistent care from not only you, the horse owner, but again from that farrier, from that veterinarian, to ensure that hoof is at the best quality that it can be. Like I said, we have to look at all those controllable factors. Nothing we can do about age, nothing we can do about genetics, but every single one of those other ones, there's something that we can do to help that hoof along as it continues to grow and to improve. And so if you have other questions, you can feel free to email us at cservice@lifedatalabs.com. I believe that email address has been floating around at the bottom. You can call us, toll-free number, and talk to Miss Susie here.
We'll push to the Corbin.
Yes, I would call just to talk to Susie. Of course, we can also get you in touch with Dr. Scott Gravely if those questions can't be answered by our customer service team. And hopefully, if you've asked questions, he's been answering them in the comments. And as I mentioned earlier, as these comments have come in, we may have missed you. We didn't purposely miss it, but we will, after this, we usually go to a computer and go through all the comments and see if we missed any and answered any that we missed. If for whatever reason you have any other questions or we didn't answer what you were asking, call us. I know a lot of companies don't like being called. We do. We like it.
I have customers tell me, well, I'm sorry I've taken up so much of your time, or I'm sorry I bothered you. That's what they're paying me for. And I love my job, and I don't mind you calling and talking about it.
Yes.
As long as we need to.
So I've traveled more this year than ever before. And that's what I have found that I enjoy the most is communicating with the customer, answering questions, and trying to help this horse as the best that we can. That's what we're passionate about. So we want to help you. So please call us. And if you are using the products and you still have questions or you're not seeing the results that you're wanting to see, call us. Because we're here to help you, and we want to see that hoof be the best quality as possible. So thank you again for joining us. Don't forget to hit that like and share button. But most of all, have an absolutely wonderful weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.